When we think of what a holy family would look like, our first thoughts don't usually include single parents or crazy home businesses working long hours or losing children to early deaths. However, those challenges and many more are exactly what a lot of us parents face. Late nights working across the table from our kids in order to help them stay focused, working extra shifts in order to provide for the family's needs, having difficult children who seem so absorbed in themselves. These are everyday trials for parents. Are there saints for us? Saints who live these things, who know this life of parented, messy family? Yeah, there are. I don't know about you, but I find it so incredibly encouraging to learn of saints a lot like me. So let me share a couple of couples that I think will inspire you in your parenting. In the middle of the 19th century, Louis, a young French man, explored being a monk. And he had to learn Latin because all the prayers were in Latin, and found that he just wasn't learning Latin. So after he left the monastery, he apprenticed himself to become a watchmaker jeweler. Across town, a young woman named Zélie was meeting with one of the mother superiors discussing her vocation. In time, mother let her know that her vocation lay elsewhere. And so she went back into the world doing her thing as a lace maker. And one day, as she was walking across a bridge, Louis walked past her. She didn't know who he was. But she had a sense that God had said inside of her, "It is he whom I am preparing for you." Goes on her way. He goes on his way, unknowing of any of these things. A little while later, they meet at a gathering, and only a few months later, they get married, curiously enough, at midnight in their parish church. He was 34, she was 26. In time, children came. He worked at his shop. She was the mom-preneur. Babies came, more babies came. Sadly, both of their sons, as well as one of their daughters, died in infancy. Another one of their daughters died as a little girl, 5. We have one of Zélie's letters to her sister-in-law, who had also lost a baby son. In it, she remembered, "When I closed the eyes of my dear little children and I buried them, I felt sorrow through and through. People said to me, it would have been better to never have had them. I couldn't stand such language. My children were not lost forever. Life is short and full of miseries, and we shall find our little ones again up above." We see both her deep, deep sorrow in any of us who have lost children in miscarriage or childhood accidents or infancy or illness, even as older parents with our adult children, seeing them die before we do. Our hearts are rent. Zélie's heart was rent. But remembering what the church teaches, remembering the hope in Christ, her baptized children, she would see them again. The series of tragedies of losing these little ones often would tear apart a family. But in this case, Louis and Zélie's love for each other grew and intensified, and it grew for their 5 remaining daughters. Over time, they're educating them, things are difficult, all the challenges of life, her business is growing. Louis closes up shop and comes and works in Zélie's business because there's so much to do. So many late nights, finishing things, getting orders ready, dealing with the paperwork and the business of the day, and dealing with their beautiful daughters. Unfortunately, Zélie developed breast cancer, and she died when their oldest was only 12. The youngest was 4. So that leaves Louis in his late 40s, having buried 4 of his children, both of his precious sons and his hopes to have a priest in the family, and his wife, his beloved Zélie. When she was teaching the children when they were little, she taught them to offer the sacrifices, the challenges of the day to God, just to please Jesus. Very simple thing you would teach a little child. He continued to encourage the girls in this, and the girls rallied around, the older girls taking care of their younger sisters, all of them grieving, of course, for the loss of their mother, but going on, as one must. Zélie's lesson continued to echo through the family. In time, the oldest approached her father. "I feel a call to Carmel," and she went. So too the second. The third, a little different. She ended up going to the Visitation Sisters, the order of her mother's sister. Louis is left at home with the youngest two, and little Thérèse, 14, "Daddy, me too." She asked the priest, the bishop, even the Pope, and at 15 was entering Carmel. Louis was left at home with Zélie, thankfully, to take care of him. 11 years after his precious wife's death, he shared with his daughters a prayer that he had recently prayed, saying, "My God, I am too happy. It isn't possible to go to heaven like this." And he offered himself to the Lord as a victim for souls. And he suffered for the next 6 years. He had dementia, hallucinations. It was a challenging time, and he remained faithful. What fruit? All 5 of their daughters became religious sisters, 4 Carmelites and a Visitation sister. The youngest, Thérèse, we know as the little flower. She's known across the world. And her little way, what is her little way of childlike trust in the Lord? Does that not sound very much like what her mother had taught her? And the Lord built upon that. How beautiful. She also, a year after her father died, offered herself as a victim for souls, just as her father had done. So the witness of these holy parents very much echoed in their children, especially in their youngest, who is a saint. Zélie and Louis are both saints as well, and their feast day is on their wedding anniversary, July 12th. I invite you to get to know them better. In the 20th century, we know of another couple. A soldier married a school teacher in 1906, and I want to tell you about them too. Within a year, they had a son, Edmund. So the challenge of bringing your baby boy to your first wedding anniversary dinner is something they knew. But Emilia's health was weak. It got weaker over the years. 10 years after Edmund came, they had a daughter. What a joy after 10 years. But little Olga died also as a baby. So tragedy struck. Her health continued to worsen, but a few years later, she found herself pregnant again. This time, her doctor strongly advised her to abort this child. Her health was too weak to carry this child to term. She and her husband, Karol, made the bold decision that their conceived baby was to be born. They bravely found a new doctor. In May, after a very difficult pregnancy, extraordinarily difficult pregnancy, and having to rely on the help of friends and her husband to take care of things at home, Emilia gives birth in their apartment to their little boy, while Karol and Edmund, who is now 13, are across the street in the parish church at Vespers praying. And at the end of Vespers, they prayed the Litany of Loretto. They sang it. Emilia knew this, of course, and asked the midwife, "Open the window of the apartment. I want the first sounds my new child hears to be the Litany of Loretto." So Karol Jr. was born to the Litany of Loretto, hearing the praises of Mary sung, hearing intercession to Mary sung. So the family continued. Emilia's health continued to get weak. Her father, Karol, her husband, helped more and more in the house and with the boys. Edmund growing up, little Karol. Sadly, she died when Karol was not quite 9 years old. His brother Edmund, already grown, was a doctor. There was scarlet fever, and a year after their precious mother died, big brother Edmund, who had been such a big part of young Karol's life, also died, leaving this father and his 10-year-old boy alone. Karol decided to retire early from his military career and devote himself to taking care of this child and raising this young boy. They were known as the two Karols and were seen all over, strolling here and there, climbing the mountains, skiing, talking, and praying. Just as with St. Louis, this father prayed his pain and let the sorrows open up immense spiritual depths within him. His son was deeply touched by these times of prayer that he saw his father in. He called it a domestic seminary. The Nazis came and impacted Krakow, where they lived. And young Karol had to go out and work in the stone quarries. One day, he came home to find his father had died of a heart attack. He stayed with his father's body and prayed for his father's soul all night. He took care of the necessary things, and he went and entered the seminary, building upon the prayers his father had taught him to say, had shown him this way of life, and the love of his mother. The cause for the canonization for Emilia and Karol Wojtyła is very, very new. It was opened in Krakow in May of 2020. We know their son as Pope St. John Paul II, and he was elected at the same time of the day that he was born, Vespers evening. And he, as we know, dedicated his papacy to Mary. So we see this echoing, this impact from his mother and his father on his life. They are servants of God. He, as we know, holy saint, wonderful Pope. Like these parents, we do all we can to guide our children to holiness, teach them to surrender their daily challenges, and to pray regularly ourselves and teach that to them. In my work as a college consultant, I have met many families over the years seeking colleges where their child can grow in the faith as well as study their desired field and do it all at an affordable cost. To help them, I created a guide to all the colleges with strong Catholic communities on campus. If you have a college-bound team, this resource will prove invaluable. In addition to information on the Catholic communities on campus, you will find a guide by major, admissions and cost, and financial aid information for each of the 300 colleges in here. This is the 4th edition, the 2021 edition. And I really strongly encourage you to get one if you have a college-bound teen in your family or you know one. Lastly, I invite you to a free talk I will be giving on Wednesday, November 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. I will be covering how to prepare your teen to finish college in 4 years, not the American average of 6, how to select the right colleges for you as a Catholic student, and how to save tens of thousands on the cost of a degree. I'm going to invite you to register at bit.ly/college4Catholics. I'll send you the Zoom link and a link to the recording after the talk. Thank you, and may God bless you and your families. That link, once again, to register for the talk is bit.ly/college4Catholics. Thank you so much. God bless you.